Hey guys, I'm Khadroth, and today we're going to be going over Hokusai's kit. She's a unit that's currently out right now on NA in the spring is in full-time bloom campaign. And again, she's also a unit that has just recently gotten an upgrade. And I talked about that in my servant strengthening video, but I did want to give a more holistic approach to her entire kit. I hear a lot of people say a lot of things about Hokusai. In fact, basically when she first came out, a little bit of history here, there were a lot of people saying, hey, get her, don't get Abby. And it was always a really interesting thing, I think, to see, because Abby is one of those units that had a lot of intangible things about her kit that were really nice. Things like being able to apply terror, being able to charge the party per turn, being able to buff strip with your NP. So some really nice stuff that Abby had that I often felt like she got the short end of the stick in that regard. But it's not without merit. Hokusai was propped up for a big reason, and that's that she is a very good unit in a lot of aspects. Those aspects are maybe not super apparent if you go to look at her stats, if you go to look at her performance on, like, say, the NP damage sheet that I'll be showing here in a little bit. But again, Hokusai still has a lot to offer. And while yes, now she is certainly having a lot of other foreigners out there as competition for her, especially units like Kukulkan that I think a lot of people are going to be looking towards in the future, she is still a unit that has quite a bit of staying power. Let's go ahead and talk about her kit. Again, she is a limited 5-star AoE arts foreigner. So when you look at it here, you do get 1200 attack power. This is a solid number. Again, it's not the highest in the game, but it is not a bad amount. It's countered by her somewhat anemic HP value for a 5-star, but still, that's definitely easily solvable given the fact that she is an extra class. Berserkers will not be effective against her, and she does have hard survival in her kit. She is man attributed here. She does have NP charge rate of only 0.33, and I think this is something that has been a thing for a lot of people when they start to talk about her. In fact, when she first came out, again, there were a lot of people, especially on the NA side of things, that were just astounded that they couldn't immediately loop easily with Hokusai. They thought that they had been sold a lie, and they almost very quickly soured on her. And I never really understood that, because nobody was promising right out of the get-go that she would be an easy looper. Similarly, too, a lot of people were caught sort of looking at JP, not realizing that JP at the time had a lot more sort of quality of life units that helped facilitate looping that NA didn't have at the point when she came out. So a lot of people have this now concept that Hokusai is a bad looper. She certainly is not going to be your best refunder out there in the game, but it doesn't mean that you can't loop with her. And this is a big thing that I've tried to tell people over and over again. You just need to be smart about how you're doing it, and sadly, a lot of people are not. So, looking at this again here, she is chaotic balanced as her alignment, she is female gendered, and for her basic traits here, she is divine existence outside the domain, just like every foreigner, hominide, humanoid, servant, threat to humanity, and weak to intimate elish. Then when you come down here and look at her actual deck here, you guys can see a little bit of the reason why she gets such a bad NP gain rate. So she has 2 buster cards, which I think we could maybe make an argument that she would be better if she had 3 arts. Triple arts would be amazing for her. But a big reason why she doesn't is, one, that Abby coming out at the same time as her basically did have triple arts in her deck, and 2, she has a 6-hit arts card. So again, this is a huge reason why they kept the NP gain rate low overall, because her card performance can be stellar still. So looking at this, yes, she only has the 2 arts cards, but it is not bad. In fact, all of her hit counts are above average to extremely above average in the arts case, other than the extra attack card, which is actually 1 below average. But otherwise, everything else here is pretty solid. So like I said, I would hope that she would have had the 3rd arts card, but it is not a deal breaker, and having more buster cards is never a bad thing. It just means you hit harder, basically. And as we come to look at her kit here, you guys can see her first skill is her hard survival capability. This is her 1-turn evasion that is also tied to her charge skill. I maybe would wish that it weren't tied in. There have been some times where I kind of had to make the choice between, do I charge now but I have to use the evasion now maybe when I don't want to, or vice versa, do I sit on the charge skill that I kind of need so that I can live to get to another NP. So it becomes a little bit of an issue, but given the fact that it is a hard survival skill and a charge skill of up to 30% here, it's only on a 5-turn cooldown, so that is not bad. You will get it back relatively fast. Doubly so when you start considering some of the options that Arts has for support, where you can start mixing in someone like Tamamo, and you'll be getting this back real fast in those sorts of scenarios. Her second skill here is, again, going to be father-daughter bond, and it is her 3 turns of Arts up. So again, that 0.33 NP gain rate is going to help be countered by a 30% Arts up. It also has, and this is I think an aspect of her kit that a lot of people forget, 100% buff removal resistance for herself. So Hokusai cannot be buff stripped for the turn that she pops this, which is a really nice thing. I think we could maybe hope that it was instead 3 turns, but still, even at the time that this came out, this was incredibly strong. There were not a lot of units that actually had buff removal resistance, and this just sort of negated any boss's capability of just, you know, removing all of the arts buffs or something that you maybe would be stacking on Hokusai to make her perform well. At least assuming you know when the buff removal will occur. If the boss is spamming it via a skill, that's a different story. You probably won't be protected, but this might buy you a turn of security in that regard. Similarly here, you also get debuff resistance for 1 turn of 100%, vastly increasing your capability to just totally, you know, negate any sort of debuff that someone's trying to put on you. So it is a really nice setup. This is going to make her have not only hard survivability, but somewhat not be removable on her buffs, as well as being able to resist any sort of bad effect that the boss is trying to put on you, which is a really potent combo already just from those 2 skills. And then we get to her third skill here, and this is Nom de Plume. It's another interesting one where basically she grants herself an on-attack activate debuff for 3 turns, where whenever she uses her arts card, she will inflict defense down for 3 turns of, again, up to 20%. So this has resulted in an interesting strategy involving Hokusai. It's one of the reasons that I said I really would have preferred if she had the triple arts deck, because you often end up finding yourself fishing for arts cards with this sort of skill, because you know you can basically get a 3-turn defense down that you can stack on the boss. This will actually work basically in a lot of scenarios, but the problem that I see with this is that this sort of shifts you from wanting to card after the NP for refund to instead wanting to card before the NP on maybe a high health enemy in a certain wave, so that you can deal more damage to that one. It ends up acting as a sort of force multiplier and equalizer of HP values in that regard, so that maybe you instead start doing something like arts NP extra versus doing something like NP arts extra. And what that ends up doing is you get basically 40% defense down going into the NP, which is really nice. Versus, hey, you'd be stacking it after the NP if you did it this way. But that changes a little bit, because this is the buff that Hokusai just recently got on NA. And that's, again, going to add the critical star absorption of arts cards for 3 turns is now an added effect of up to 500%. And then a crit star bomb of up to 15 stars. So this does help sort of shift things back in favor of potentially doing it after the NP. So again, doing NP AA instead of doing AA into the NP. And again, the reason I like this upgrade is it's malleable. It allows you to do either, really. It gives you a reason to do both, basically saying, hey, if you feel like you need that extra damage, you can card before the NP to set that up. Versus, hey, if you feel like you're gonna need refund because you know Hokusai's NP gain rate latently will not be that good, you can hopefully get the arts cards, apply them after the NP to whatever enemy that lived, and then potentially get arts crits with them for even more NP gain. So it can be a real lifesaver in that regard. But I think ultimately that's looking at it from a more farming perspective. And in Hokusai's case, you're probably not. In a lot of uses of Hokusai, you're going to want to use her in more of a challenge environment, and someone that can basically wave clear for you while stacking these defense downs on an enemy. And in those sorts of scenarios, it maybe doesn't matter as much whether or not you're putting it before or after. In fact, you probably want to put it after in a lot of those cases, just so you get the free refund. It maybe spares your charge skills for someone else and being able to get their NP up in level. That way you don't have to use everything on her. But still, it just depends on whether or not you're trying to set up the damage or refund afterwards with this. And again, then we get to the passive skills here. She does have existence outside the domain EX here for 2 crit stars per turn, and then an additional 12% debuff resistance. She gets item and construction B, similar to some of the caster traits that are out there, for an additional debuff success rate of 8%. So again, that'll help applying defense downs and stuff like that. And then she does get the territory creation D for an additional arts performance of 4%. This will just be more icing on the cake. This will help out that poor NP gain rate. It's not the most amazing thing in the world. It's not the worst though either. And then we get Divinity B here in the last one. And again, this is just going to add a flat 175 damage to all of her damage sources, so not too bad there. Now, looking at her append skills here, she obviously has the extra attack finesse, and this can certainly be a strong one for her, especially when you know you're going to be wanting to form those chains with the NP, maybe to set up more damage, maybe to set up more refund. Because again, this will impact every aspect of the extra attack. But given the fact that her extra attack is only 4 hit as opposed to the average of 5, this is probably not going to be the first one I want to go after in terms of my append skills. In fact, it might be the last. It just depends though on what your strategy overall is for using her. Because the second one is obviously mana loading that can add 20% starting charge, which does function pretty well with her charge skill being 30%. So you can kind of just get a free 50% right there turn 1 if you were to go ahead and pop that. But it maybe depends on, do you want to front load like damage or NP gain or something like that, as opposed to, again, trying to just get this all out in turn 1. It just maybe is an issue depending on the node or depending on the enemy you're fighting. But still, mana loading is almost always a good thing to have. And then we get to the third append, and in her case, it's actually a great one. Hokusai is already a berserker's worst nightmare in that regard, but then adding a third append skill that is effective against berserkers on top of that, yeah, that's gonna be really solid for her. So this is why I'm saying, to me, the extra attack finesse might actually be the weakest one in this case, because pretty much the mana loading and the berserker, the anti-berserker attack damage aptitude are going to be very good for her to have. So I definitely think both of those are worthy of consideration, but we'll just have to see what they do with coins in the future, or again, maybe if you've rolled a lot, you won't have to make that hard choice. Looking at her Noble Phantasm here, it is still thankfully a 5-hit AoE arts NP, which is nice. It deals damage to all enemies, and it deals extra damage to enemies with a man attribute. It is really nice in that regard. I often see a lot of people getting confused about this. Man attribute is up there with like earth and sky. It is one of the big triangle basically of attribute types. Don't confuse that with like human or anything like that. That's different. So again, this is a really, really nice wide niche to have. It does affect roughly a third of the units in the game. So I do like it in that regard. And again, I think this is something where you don't have to have man to be able to use Hokusai effectively, but this will certainly help out quite a bit given the fact that it is a super effective modifier here on the NP. So naturally, if you can find that sort of again synergy there within the node, this will make Hokusai a great choice for you. Now looking at our NP damage here, again, I have sorted this list by NP1 and by AoE, so that again, you guys are only going to see the AoE foreigners here, and you're only going to see potentially NP1s that we'll focus on here, because again, we are talking about a limited SSR here. So I always assume NP1 in that case. I don't talk to you guys about, you know, obviously the possibility of having NP5 and better and stuff like that is here, but you're not going to necessarily all be doing that. So it's a lot easier to talk with the base values in mind. Now, again, sometimes this sheet can be misleading to people that don't really know how it works. The way this sheet works is it assumes all of your own self buffs are active. So for instance, in Abby Summers' case, this number actually looks really strong, and it would be. The problem with this is where all of her buffs are active, including her debuffs, which is just on one enemy, even though she's an AoE. So this would be the amount of damage she would deal to one enemy with all of her own stuff opt neutral. It wouldn't be the amount that she would deal to the splash damage enemies that are basically alongside. So if you're using her in an AoE environment, she would do less damage to the side adds compared to as much damage she would do here to the main one. That's why I'm saying it's kind of interesting, and a thing that you guys really need to understand, that these sheets can be misleading if you don't understand how they actually work. Same thing, Voyager here, his damage isn't bad, and he does still have Sky attribute helping him out. And then you've obviously got units like Koi and Sky of Darkness that have extra niches here in terms of their damage that they can add in. And then as we keep scrolling down the list here, you've got Jack de Molay, who's another AoE and has curse damage to add for even more damage. And then you have the real beast that just recently came out here, Kukulkan. And Cuckoo, even at NP1, is only at 21.9, but then certainly has all sorts of extra stuff that we can basically get for even more damage here. And so that's where, again, I think you're going to see a lot of people start to compare Kukulkan to any AoE foreigner, or any foreigner even for that amount. So just understand, though, that what you get when you get Kukulkan is sort of the ability to automate a 3-turn, but naturally, if we start going longer than that, Buster has maybe some going concerns for sustain and stuff like that. They do certainly have units like Merlin that can help that out, but it's not necessarily going to be this, you know, tight ship of, hey, I'm just using double K and Skya, I'm getting everything back, and you get really that huge sort of confluence of all the buffs active in that like 3-turn scenario for a Buster system. Arts doesn't necessarily have that issue, and certainly even though we see Hokusai down here at the bottom of this list for your AoEs, she's still at a pretty respectable 18k here neutral, and certainly then you have the ability to stack nom de plume in front, you have the man attribute, and so you can do even more here. Sorry, that's nom de plume in front, that's man attribute, and then the top one is both. So Hokusai's damage is still nothing to sneeze at. She can still do really quality damage for you. And again, remember that these numbers are neutral. But that's where I really like her, is again in a sort of more long type of fight where, hey, there are man attribute enemies in there, and I know I'm going to be able to go the distance with her, looping over things, stacking those defense downs, and really just overall putting in a big hurt on them. Because again, I do think Hokusai's card performance with that high attack power is very nice. So again, while I do think she's maybe in line to consider some sort of NP interlude that would basically take all of her NP2 numbers over here and move them to NP1, that would be really nice for her. It would not be the most broken thing in the world, but certainly I think, you know, that at least puts her a lot more back up towards the top. And given the fact that she is one of our first foreigners ever released into the game, I'm okay with that at this point. She's been around for quite a while, and she could certainly, I'd say, use some attention to her NP, but she's not a bad unit even in spite of that. You don't have to feel bad about her. And that's one of the things that I think I really like about Arts down the stretch, is Arts kind of has always had that sort of staying power as part of its system. So Hokusai works really well in that, even though she doesn't have the best NP game. So let me know what you guys think down below. How do you guys feel about Hokusai? Would you like to see her get another buff? And again, how do you think Kukulkan changes things up for our foreigners now as we head forward? I'll see you guys for the next video. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.